Hi there, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Josh McKelvin. Of course, on Thursday, in case you missed it, thousands gathered on the State House lawn for what is being called the biggest rally in the state, at least in recent history. In the face of all this, the budget bill that moved forward includes hundreds of millions of dollars in cuts to programs and services, but there's also a provision that would cut collective bargaining rights for public employees. We're going to spend some time on this issue this morning. As I mentioned, our first guests are the chairman of the state and Republican parties, state Democratic and Republican parties. Jack Kimball from the Republican side, Ray Buckley, of course, from the Democratic side. Thanks very much for joining us, first of all.
Thanks for having us.
And Jack, I want to start with you. All week long, you're kind of hammering away at some things that you, in reference to the demonstrations, you said there was a lot of misinformation out there. Characterize what you're talking about.
Well, I think that, and I want to use Lynn Blankenbecker, state rep, a wonderful state rep, Republican state rep. The union showed up in front of her house. This is a Navy commander. She's going to be going to Afghanistan in a couple months and being placed in harm's way. And when you listen to some of the union, they filmed this, they were claiming that she bailed on the vote, that she refused to vote, and we were talking about a bill that certainly was a union-oriented vote. But she, because of the filibuster the Democrats put on, she had to leave the room and take a phone call because everything went late, talk to her commanding officer and the people that at the Pentagon about her orders. It was a pre-arranged phone call. She had to take it. When she came back, the vote had ended. So the accusation that she bailed on the bill and things like that is completely wrong. It's false.
Put it in the context of what you're talking about overall up there in Concord.
Well, I think what we're seeing is the claims of the union, claims that people are going to die, or, you know, those kinds of scare tactics that are being used all the time because of certain budget cuts, completely outrageous and false. I mean, people have to understand that, you know, it's tantamount to shooting the messenger. The Republicans have been put in a position where they have to perform and come up with a fiscally responsible budget. We have close to $1 billion structural deficit, and they're doing a hell of a job. They really are coming up with a budget that makes sense, and there's going to be some pain. But those are the things. It's the scare tactics and the ways that I think these things are being presented.
All right, now, Mr. Buckley, you were there in the demonstrations. What do you make of what Chairman Kimball just said?
Well, I think that the people of New Hampshire, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, people who've never even been political at all, showed up in opposition to this outrageous budget. When you have Bishop Robinson and Bishop McCormick on the same stage claiming that this is an immoral budget, when the majority of state newspapers say that this is an immoral budget, this cuts it gives a $100 million income tax on the police officers and the firefighters in the state of New Hampshire and the working families. It cuts $80 million out of the UNH budget. It cuts $115 million from the hospitals, so that's either going to go to higher expenses for health care for New Hampshire people, or it's going to be massive cuts. The health care providers are one of the largest employers in the state. This budget could actually double, if you extrapolate it out, could actually double New Hampshire's unemployment. This is a false budget. The numbers are made up. Republican member of the House Finance Committee got on the floor and claimed that the Republicans were purposely lowballing it because they wanted to make these outrageous cuts.
Now, yeah, it's interesting that you call it a false budget, because that's exactly what we were from the Republicans, or last time around, back in before the November elections. I mean, how is this any different? I mean, because projections are everything here.
Well, you had a dozen Republicans that stood with the Democrats in opposition to this budget. The Republicans in the state Senate said this proposal, there isn't a single vote for the collective bargaining, the union-busting collective bargaining proposal, according to the Senate president. So this is the point of this is, I don't understand. I can't imagine trying to put together a Republican campaign or majority going into 2012. 50% of New Hampshire firefighters are registered Republicans, and they've just stabbed them all in the back. These are the people that 9/11, they were our national heroes, and this is how we're going to pay them back, by eliminating their ability to organize and attack their retirement. The police officers, these are people who every single day put their lives on the line for the people of New Hampshire, and the Republican Party has decided that, well, according to the Speaker, that they're irrelevant. That's what he called up at them, which I'd never heard of before. I mean, he's in big trouble anyways with the unconstitutional move of clearing the House gallery. I'd never heard of that. I served almost 20 years in the legislature. The Constitution allows him to have individual people that have made a disturbance out, but certainly not to close the entire gallery. It's just another example of what Bill O'Brien and this John Bircher Tea Party or Free State majority has done to the state of New Hampshire.
Yeah, I want to focus in on some of that union legislation we're talking about, that collective bargaining agreement. You know, Neil Kirk's amendment, and Republicans were saying, look, we need to get $50 million from state employees, but this was an amendment that encompassed, as Chairman Buckley just said, you know, your police and firefighters, your teachers, seem to be pretty widespread, and the adjective that a lot of Democrats use was malicious move.
Oh, I don't think it was a malicious move. The malicious move was when John Lynch had and the democratically controlled legislature in this state passed the LLC tax in the middle of the night, and that wound up becoming, you know, law. That's malicious. These hearings are going to be heard. This is a normal process that occurred, and this particular amendment we're talking about evens the playing field. It really does put some pressure on unions to make sure that they get a contract passed on a timely basis, and I think it's absolutely apropos. Let's be honest, the taxpayers pay 100% of the salaries of every single state union worker. And that's the taxpayers and the voters that made it resoundingly clear on November 2nd that they want to see a fiscally responsible budget, and a budget that reduces spending and provides some tax relief as well. That is exactly what's going on with the Republican legislature, and they're doing a very good job with it.
But Jack, Ronald Reagan, the hero of the Republican Party, said that collective bargaining is a foundation for a free and liberty society. And your party has decided that Ronald Reagan is wrong?
There's a substantial difference between collective bargaining in the private sector, Ray, and the public sector. When you're sitting down across the table and you're bargaining with the very people that you're going to elect, and the dollars and cents that are taking coming out of the union dues are used in advertisements supporting liberal Democrats. They get elected,
illegal,
and you have
Jack.
Come on, the sweetheart deals are made all the time, which is why we're in the mess we're in.
You're accusing the firefighters and police officers of breaking the law? They can't use union dues for campaign activities.
You're listening to the ads now that are coming on, the union ads that are being placed with respect to the fire department and others. Where's the money come to pay for those ads?
I don't believe there's a campaign going on right now.
Well, there is.
Well, there are ads running.
There is.
But this is about the budget, Jack. This is about people being able to stand up and speak freely. That's the problem with the modern-day Republican Party. You all talk about liberty, but it's only liberty for yourselves. It's not about the average working person. If people want to stand up and say, hey, you know what? There was a commitment that was made when I decided this profession 20 years ago, 15 years ago, when I put myself on the line to be a police officer or a firefighter or EMT or any of these other respective professions, and with a switch of a hand, you're all saying, well, that doesn't matter anymore. You've created a phony, an absolutely totally phony crisis here that even the state Senate and the governor, of course, is rejecting.
Well, obviously it's not a phony crisis because the people voted loudly and clearly to make sure that we got the message that there was a crisis. Clearly there is a crisis, not just here, in Wisconsin, Illinois, Ohio, and all across this country. We are now in the fight for the soul of this country. And clearly what has to happen is we have to become fiscally responsible, not only in the state of New Hampshire, but nationally as well. And that's what this fight is about.
Well,
you can't shoot the messenger.
I don't think the voters went into the booth and said, check off because we support a state party that's run by the John Birch Society. And, I think that if you guys had been really honest with the public, I think there would have been a different result.
All right, quickly, we have to move forward to some other issues, obviously.